Hello, welcome to Pathways of Life. My name is Arvid Elbeck. Today I'm going to talk about something that's going on in our culture that I'm looking at, that I'm actually looking at and thinking it's an epidemic that's taking place in our culture. What I'm referring to is marriage, divorce, and remarriage. I want to spend a few minutes in talking about what the Bible says about those different functions that we go through in our culture. One of the things that we have going on today is the average marriage in the United States has a lifespan of about 8.5 years. And I want to look at what the Bible has to say about that lifestyle, how that happens. And with that, what it continues on, it gets worse from that, because what some people do after they're divorced, then they run off and get a few years later and get married again. The second marriage, it has a 60% chance of failure. And if you haven't had enough brain damage going through that process, some people even go off and get married the third time. Well, the third marriage has a 73% chance of failure. So I want to look at some of the things that the Bible talks about, some of these issues that are going on in our culture, and what we can do about it, and what Jesus says about it, and what the Bible says about it. I want to first look at Matthew chapter 19, where in that particular verse it says the Pharisees were taunting Jesus. And they asked Jesus, can we divorce our wives for every and anything we can think of? And so with that, Jesus said, you're confused, that he that made you from the beginning made us male and female. And then he quoted Genesis chapter 2:24, and it has to do with how after God had created the woman, he brings the woman to the man. And then Jesus quotes Genesis 2:24, and he says, therefore, and Adam says, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, shall cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And then Jesus continued on and said, except for fornication, you have no option for divorce. Now, going back to, I'm familiar with a few verses from marriage vows. One marriage vow that I'm familiar with is, do you take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife, promising before God with your friends as witnesses, will you care for her and provide for her in sickness and in health, in good times and lean times, all the days of her life, keeping yourself to her and to her alone, till death does you part. That's the actual format that God intends in our lifestyle, going back to Genesis chapter 2:24 that Jesus had quoted to the Pharisees, that God made this male and female in the beginning, Genesis chapter 1, 27 and 28, and he goes, therefore let us make man in our image. In the image of God he made them male and female. Then he blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. Prior to that, God looked at Adam and said that it's not good for a man to be alone, and I'm going to make for him a woman that's going to be a helper to him. And so with that, why that's God's intention from the beginning, that he's making somebody adequate to help Adam. Adam was in the garden and naming the animals and caring for the trees and that kind of thing. And so God looked at that and he said that it's not good for man to be alone. I want to bring that in as a very serious point when people go off and get married, and then their marriages, on an average, last only eight and a half years and end up in divorce. I want to talk about what God says about divorce and remarriage. It's a very serious profile that God has laid out here for that. The only permissible reason for divorce is adultery. Now, going back to looking at the amount of divorces that we have in America, for most parts, according to the latest information, it's infidelity that causes people to go into divorce. And so with that, I'd have to wonder why do we have such a level of infidelity in our culture when we're taking a marriage vow that you say you promise before God with your friends as witnesses that you will care for this woman and be faithful to her, and you'll be faithful to her and her alone all the days of your life till death does you part. It's a covenant, it's a promise. And when you break that promise, now you have a violation with what goes on with in the relationship we have with God. Proverbs 2:16 and 17, you will save her from the adulteress and the wayward wife who has left the partner of her youth. You have left that. God is condemning you and pointing out that what you're doing is not a acceptable lifestyle. And he says you have broken that covenant with God when you divorce that woman. Luke 16:18, everyone who puts away his wife and marries another commits adultery. And she that marries the husband commits adultery. I want to make this very clear what's going on here, what the Bible is telling us about marriage and divorce and remarriage. When we get to remarriage, why Jesus said there's one option for being involved in divorce, and that's unfaithfulness. And so with that, but now we have in America we have something called no-fault divorce. So I'm mad at my wife because she burned my toast every morning, and I'm just going to divorce her and get rid of her. Well, that's a great idea, but now you've got a problem. Your next problem is if I go off and marry some other woman, two things have taken place. I'm now committed adultery, and the woman that I'm marrying, that hopefully doesn't burn my toast anymore, she's an adulteress. And what's worse than that, to continue on with this, to make this very clear, that my wife that burns the toast, she goes off and gets married. Now she's an adulteress, and whoever it is that she marries, he's an adulterer. So it's a very clear Bible understanding what God intends for us in that relationship with marriage. Do you take this woman promising before God? And the only option with that is till death does you part. And we need to be very, very clear about that. I want to look at Matthew 5:32. Everyone that divorces his wife, except for fornication, it makes her an adulterer, and whoever she marries is an adulterer, and whoever he marries, it's a four-way condemnation, we'll call it. It's just not, well, I just got tired of that old woman, and I'm just going to get another one. Well, no, you can't do that, because now that's not the Christian type of life. Paul writes in the New Testament, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Are we clear about that? How did Christ love the church? I was teaching a Bible class some months ago, and I brought this particular subject up, and I go, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church. And I said, all you men that are here, put your hand up if you're going to love your wife as Christ loved the church. Now, I want to be somewhat clear about how Christ loved the church. Christ died for the church. Men, are we prepared to die for our wives? And the interesting thing about that, not one hand went up. And so with that, there's kind of a side joke, sort of, but still, it's the commitment, and it's what husbands need to be really serious about in the relationship, in the marriage type of lifestyle. In Malachi 2:14 through 16, because you have broken your faith with her. She is your partner, your wife for life, till death does you part. And then Malachi writes in, he says, God hates divorce. Now, I only know of one other part in the Bible, in Proverbs 16, where he says he hates. There's 7 things that God hates. So it's a violation, something that God is not happy with, when he particularly made the woman because to provide a suitable mate for Adam to fulfill his life. And so with that, as I conclude, I want us to think about that, how very serious the relationship has to be within that marriage relationship, and does not for any way end up, as we've talked about, where we have the average marriage in the United States now lasts 8.5 years, and it's terminated because of infidelity. So that needs to be, I want you to think about how to change that, and how to look at what God says about when you get involved in that divorce scenario, and you exit out of that and enter into another marriage. The marriage, divorce, and remarriage is what I'm talking about this morning, and how it's a violation of what God has a plan for us, as we are his creation, and he knows what's best for us. We didn't see in the creation where God brings the woman to Adam after the creation, and Adam says, this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. And so with that, he didn't bring 4 or 5 women out to him and say, if that one doesn't work out, why don't you pick another one? That's not the plan in the beginning at all. Think about those things as I conclude. Thank you for listening.